All right, let's do it. Happy Monday morning, everyone. Hope everyone had a good, fun, and/or relaxing weekend, depending on which of those things you're going for. They're not exclusive or productive, right? You could have a fun, relaxing, productive weekend, some combination thereof. Today in class, we're going to take a little bit of an aside and focus on this idea of tissue ownership that we started with on Friday. And we're going to do something a little bit different. So it'll be a little bit of an adventure, but I think it'll be a fun adventure. So in advance of class today, you read a paper and had a bunch of questions to kind of think about and jot down some notes and thoughts about, but you didn't actually have to submit anything. And so for class today, we're going to kind of debrief those ideas and get a little better idea of what you think about that, explore these ideas a little bit more. We'll pick back up with the skeletal system and get into the appendicular skeleton on Wednesday. But first today looks like this. So we're going to start off, I just have some announcements to make, and then we'll have our tissue ownership debate. And then we are going to wrap things up. Oh, and actually I don't have a ticket out at the end today, just some wrap-ups and reminders about upcoming class stuff. So just a quick reminder, there's free tutoring available. Chase Reinert is ready. I know at least 3 of you have contacted her, are currently having tutoring sessions. It's free. Take advantage of it. Go ahead and let me know or contact her directly if you're interested. Also, remember the book is now in Beagley Library to check out. So if you need that, it is there waiting for you anxiously for someone to crack open its brand new 9th edition cover and get that initial, like, you know, when you open a book for the first time and the spine kind of cracks a little bit, you could be that person for the 9th edition of Human Anatomy by Mary Abitall. So I don't know what you're doing right after class today, but there's going to be a rush. Go to Beagley and crack that spine, which is appropriate for an anatomy book. There's a joke in there somewhere, but oh well. All right, before we get into the debate, what questions do you have? Great, let's debate. Okay, so we're talking about medical rights. Did I miss your hand? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to ask if you determined the quiz format.
I did, and I actually have a slide with all that information. At the end of class, I'll have details about your quiz. Yep, good question. I knew someone was going to ask that. I'm trying to think of there's got to be a joke about an anatomy book having a spine and an appendix, right? Look at that. What else would be an anatomical feature in a human body and a book? Those are the 2 things I can think of. 10,000 bonus points if you can think of another one and then come up with a good joke like that. Like, why was the book in the hospital? Because it had its appendix? No, they can't really, that doesn't work. Anyway, okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to take these ideas about medical rights and tissue ownership and kind of debate and discuss them. And so what I'm really interested in today is you exploring these ideas and kind of challenging yourself to think differently and to think of different contingencies and how this might affect you. So this is not, generally this class is pretty fact-based. You're like, oh, this is the, transverse process of a vertebra. I need to learn this and memorize it. Here's a fact I know, boom. Today's class is not like that. What I'm really interested in is just kind of thinking about ideas and reflecting on them. And so to do that, we're going to set up this debate, which we don't normally do in class, because for an anatomy class, it'd be a little weird if you debated, like, I don't know, is this a humerus or a femur? What's your thought on that? Like, there's kind of one answer. There's not one answer to this. And so what we're going to have, we're going to set up 2 sides. Side A is going to be you're going to argue in favor of the belief that patients whose tissue is sampled should have no rights to it whatsoever. Once the sample's gone, that's it. You have no right to know what happens to it, no right to make money on it, no right to control it or anything like that. The other side, Team B, is going to be the opposite. They think that patients should have complete rights to it. You should be able to determine who uses it for research, who makes money off of it, where it's goes, how it's stored, how it's propagated, how it's disposed, all of those things. Now, I realize this is a little bit of a Manichaean setup, so it's very, these are the 2 extreme points of view, but it'll be more fun and interesting to debate the extremes. Of course, reality is somewhere in between these 2 things. I want to recognize that, but for the sake of debate and making it interesting, we're going to take these extreme views, right? And so the ground rules for the debate are going to look like this. You are randomly assigned to a side, so you're not actually arguing what you believe. And I actually think that's important because that removes you a little bit from, like, feeling like you actually need to, like, defend your own personal ideas, right? And so we're not really, what we're doing here is testing out ideas, not necessarily like pushing forth your own thoughts on this, right? And so that way, if somebody has a really unpopular idea in this debate and is pushing an idea, you don't see them after class and be like, ugh, that person thinks that your tissue should never be owned by you, or whatever. So just recognize that like we're arguing this kind of in an intellectual way. We're not taking on our own personal beliefs. Once you're in your teams, you're going to have 5 minutes to kind of debrief, organize your notes, talk about what your approach is going to be, how you want to do that, and then we'll debate for 10 minutes. During the debate, the ground rules are that you have a maximum of 30 seconds. I really don't like when people, I'm going to set my timer here, just drone on and on. So you got 30 seconds when you're talking. Boom, you got to make your point, and then it goes back to the other side. And each person on your side gets to talk once before people start talking more than once. So I recommend using this 5 minutes to organize your notes and kind of think about who's going to make what points, maybe kind of what order you want to do that, how you want to do that. You can help each other out. My goal here is to give the debate some structure and to make sure it's not just the two loudest people going back and forth the whole time. I'm not going to be super, super, super strict on this, right? My goal is to have everyone be able to participate as they would like and to make sure we have a multitude of voices heard. And so that's the reason I put that structure in place. And then finally, we're going to switch and you're going to argue actually the opposite side, which will be interesting because you just heard the counter argument. So now you make the other arguments. It's kind of like law school today. Anybody going to law school? Yeah, I should ask that again at the end of the class. And you'd be like, yeah, law school is awesome. I don't know. I don't have any idea what law school is like. I just made that up. Yeah, I really have no idea. So anyway, for the first debate, here are your teams. Team A, which I'm going to ask everyone in Team A, what we're going to do is kind of pack up your bags and stuff as neatly as you can under the tables and have Team A go to this side of the room and kind of turn your chairs so you're facing the other side. And Team B will be on this side of the room facing this way. You can see where your names are. So go ahead and get set up with your team. Question?
My name's
Oh, that's weird. Oh, that sucks. I'm such a dunce. Okay, hold on. All right, give me 2 minutes and I will update this with the new names. I actually have it right here.
No, we didn't comment what we're doing.
Okay. It's always nice when you take a whole bunch of time and set things up meticulously, only to find out that you goofed. Okay. I know exactly what happened and why it did that. Oh, wait.
Is that your photo? Is that your photo?
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. There, I added the extra names. Everyone that was up there, you're in the same spot. I accidentally cut 2 rows off the bottom of the table when I was cutting Casey. Randomized. So there you go.
So which side is which?
Team A is saying no rights. Team B is saying all rights. Question, yes, Bryce. Oh. Yeah, you just have to talk twice as much. Yeah, I believe in you. You can do it. Sorry, Bryce. Are we okay? We're good? Casey, Sam, Astrid, you're all over here. Yes. Okay, so you're all team A over here. Now this classroom is not a good setup for this, so what we can do is what you guys do is turn out this way and you row in the middle. Are you team A?
Yeah. It's fine, Mama.
Now, Ray, you're all team B over here.
Yeah.
You guys are team B. Okay, you can grab that little desk and I'll get you a chair, okay? Oh, here, you can use this chair. Pull it over here. The classroom's not very good, I recognize that. We'll make do.
Done the person who does the work because they did the work. Everything was there. So in this case, they doctor does the work, the patient. So they do that work. So that's usually the approach to the public.
And I think you're fine.
Zoom recording. Is that working for everybody? Yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks for being flexible with the setup. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. What I'd like is for Team A to get us started here. Right. So it's a little bit more of a good starting point for us. So Team A, whenever you're ready, go ahead and what are you gonna lead with? Go for it.
I guess I can start.
Yeah.
That we just wanted to broadly say first that anything done illegally on the terms of tissue rights and ownership we don't support. So like not informing a patient beforehand, like we don't support that at all. So we didn't really think that we had to argue for that.
That's a good point. So yeah, just to lay the groundwork, like you can't, go in at night and steal someone's tissue.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
take something like in the case of Henrietta Lacks, not have her aware of what's happening.
That's a great starting point. Yeah, cool. All right. So given that a tissue is taken reasonably, why should a patient have no rights to what happens to that tissue or any benefits from that?
Can I speak again, or
Whoever, somebody in your team, yeah, you can go again because
okay. We came up with one analogy of it, of even if you're making something and you're giving it away or selling it, like if you made like a piece of furniture and you're then selling it to somebody, that then doesn't entitle you to the rights of like what's done with that furniture, what happens to the furniture, what's, if somebody then resells it on, that doesn't entitle you to any monetary gain from that sale. Just one point.
Quick, yes, 30 seconds. Team B, let's have at it.
California Court, 1984.
Well, you were going to law school for sure.
A man named John Moore. He was 43 years old and he had cancerous spleen. University of California professor, they don't name his name, stole cells from his spleen to use in research. And the court then in July 23rd, 1988 ruled that human tissues and cells remain a person's property when taken for medical purposes. So people still have all rights of their tissues.
Ooh, it's getting real. Team A, throw back.
It's not even applicable because he stole the content. This is in a context that, in the case, we have an initial consensual agreement that, you know, we're gonna be taking your tissue. So not just like, oh, well, we'll just take it for a little bit.
Well, I think even though you have informed consent, it doesn't mean that you actually know what's gonna happen after you give the tissue. So I think if you have the ability to know exactly what's happening once you give the tissue, then that will clarify what's going on, kind of with the researchers, what they're doing, the treatment. It's even though you have informed consent initially, it doesn't mean that they are actually gonna be a continuous informed consent throughout the entire process. You still have no idea what's happening after informed consent. So it's more important to actually be clear with what's going on, transparency and everything.
Yeah, May, what do you think about that? The idea that informed consent only goes so far.
I mean, so because if someone doesn't read the terms and conditions, then that doesn't mean they can sue the hospital.
Talk a little more about that. I think that's an important point.
Can you just say that?
Just
say it.
I was, I already had a point, so I don't know if you want to.
Just go, yeah.
So,
But then you're done eating.
For the legal process of it, you have to disclose, we're gonna be taking, if you donate blood, there's a terms and conditions of we're gonna take your blood, it can be donated, it could go to specifically for research processes. Actually, I think for the research process itself, you have to specifically sign off for it, and it lists everything that can be done with it. So just because you didn't read one line, and they've had cases like this before in a technology lawsuit, where just because it's in a terms and conditions and you didn't read the terms and conditions, doesn't mean you can then sue the people who gave out the terms and conditions.
So TV, then, do you think that that should extend even in unforeseen circumstances? Let's say that something's used that you can't even predict in your first time out, you still retain ownership in that case. Seems to nod that, yeah. So
I think that at the point the research project changed, each patient would have to be re-informed about what their tissues were going to then be used for.
it has to go back to the patient. Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
But also, I think if that was the case, I feel a lot of people our donations would go down because they'd be scared that they're worried about what's gonna happen to their tissue or something.
I mean, I think that goes back to Grace's point about transparency in it. At the end of the day, it's your body. You should be able to make that choice. Yes, you're setting off on it, but what if there comes a time and it's oh, they have a breakthrough and they're actually, let's just kind of maybe not notify them. And then what happens when someone drops the ball?
But also, I feel that happens with anything though. Just because you label something as property doesn't mean government can't take it away from you. Government always takes something away from you. It doesn't foreclose limitations, I guess I could say that. Doesn't mean they're not gonna just still take it if it's something interesting.
Yeah, but there's money involved in too. That it's like you said, if there's a breakthrough in a case and they find a cure for cancer or something, they're not making anything. It's not their tissue anymore. So therefore, you put them in that situation to say, you don't owe you anything. You donate your tissue. You sign this paper, yeah, but you're not getting anything from it after you help save millions of lives.
But if it doesn't say anything on it that you can get something, then you're signed off on it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure in there it says that you're aware that you can't make money off of it.
Yeah, and what if you signed something that said you would get something out of it?
Well, then that's you then.
Yeah.
We're saying that you are signing off on that.
Right now.
I'm getting you.
That's a government system issue.
We got, come on, I got Asher and Cameron with their hands up here too, so.
I mean, at the end of the day, you agreed to donate. Like you go to Goodwill, you give away your clothes. Once you give away your clothes, you don't go on the once you like see someone wearing your clothing on the street, you don't go and take it off and say, "Mom." You gave away your clothes. So like you give away your tissue, you give away your tissue. It's like,
You're
you don't-
donating
you don't
something,
give it
you're
back.
volunteering, and
Yeah,
giving
you
it
don't
away.
have to like. It's no longer yours to deal with. You gave it away.
Donation from the Oxford language. Now, something that is given to a charity, especially some money, the action of donating some. Some more. Yes, it's not true. Certain translations and more definitions. Words in Latin, donum, donor. I'm going to stop there because I have nothing else to do.
Good, Karen.
Well, firstly, I'd like to point out the fact that you guys are comparing like clothes to pieces of body, which I feel like is not a comparison to be made because there's a vastly different things that have vastly different significance to them. And then secondly, I also like to point out that most of these things when we talk about donations, in the medical field likes to thrive off of people that are poor, come from different backgrounds, have less education, and they take advantage of that. Especially in things like vaccines, way back a long time ago. Like there was a whole thing where there was vaccines being made, and they were using predominantly Black men and testing these vaccines on these people, and these people were getting very ill and dying because of it, because the medical field likes to feed off of that and it likes to take advantage of these people.
So how do we ensure that people aren't taking advantage?
Yeah, there may not be a boundary.
It's not that what they were intentionally taking them. They weren't doing what I did.
Yeah, I'm probably.
I saw another hand, Bryce. Yeah, you gotta speak twice too, so.
I do not speak in French. I was gonna answer like a different question. She said we were comparing it to clothing, but we could compare it to like egg donations or sperm donations if we don't have that. So that's how we do it.
I was gonna say, when you donate blood, more than half people don't hear back from like what happened to her, where it went, or anything.
I've never heard that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't expect to either in that case, right?
A lot of people wouldn't expect to hear back for it because you're worried to do that.
Go ahead, jump back and forth. Yeah,
So I feel like we're talking about what is like the current protocol, but that doesn't mean that's what it should be. So just because right now, like you donate your eggs and your sperm and you don't have rights to them, that like we're kind of trying to debate what it should be. So I think we're trying to talk about like protecting the patients and their rights to their tissues, and if that should be more important, which we feel like it is. And there should be more consent involved and further along in the process as well, and for the people to be more involved in those decisions. So.
Yeah, just go ahead and jump in. What I'm interested in now is let's make sure people who haven't had a chance to speak up are being able to jump in there. But feel free to make it organic, go back and forth, or jump in as you like.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of that, just on the terms of body, court case Davis v. Davis ruled that the embryo is the right of the person who donated it, even if it was given to a facility.
Ignore that, just ignore that.
Therefore, I don't understand why human tissue, even if given to a medical facility, would not have the same kind of like rulings over it. When it's not completely the same concept, however, it comes from a human body and it's donated to a facility. And that court case ruled that they still have every right over it, so why don't tissues have the same rights? I want to read your opinion.
So I know Emma had her hand up.
No, I was about to make a point really, but I mean, I guess in terms of like offering consent at every point, there's a point where that's ineffective when it comes to like, oh, this person needs someone to save their life, but you have to get consent from the person who donated to give it to them, and then by that point it could be expired, they could have died. And so in certain, especially when it comes to this, it's not, I mean, we're comparing to clothes, but when it comes to, there's only a certain amount of time it's viable, and the cost of also have, if you have the rights to it, then you should pay, possibly have to pay for the storage of it, and that's a whole other thing. And I think it's a way like donating blood and plasma and organs and even cadavers, it's effective because they donate it to the medical field, and for most of them, they know what's best for the cadaver, where it can be best suited and where it can help the most people, where people individually.
When organs are donated, the person's mostly dead.
Well,
Like, you know that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
no,
if
I know,
an organ
I know.
is donated,
I know, I'm just saying, in terms of donating
Therefore,
I'm not.
they sign off ahead of time. to donate that.
Yeah.
There's only, like, certain organs only have 2 to 3 hours from the
Yeah.
time of death to get
Yeah.
to a transplant.
You know, that wasn't, that I'm not saying to that when it comes to, I'm talking about other things, or when it comes to like notifying someone before having to originally get it, I'm not talking about the organs, but yeah, and it's the same thing, you sign a consent to donate organs, and you are, it's the same consent for human tissue.
Here's a scenario, just to kind of keep the debate going, and I think what we'll do is we'll continue this debate for a little longer with these sides, and then we'll wrap it up, and so we won't switch back on those sides. So I think this is interesting, that we're just kind of getting into it now. I want to cut it short. Let's say that I'm elderly, no, it doesn't really matter if I'm old or not. Let's say that I have gallbladder cancer. They take my gallbladder out, and there are some cells, the way the cells are operating in my gallbladder are like really interesting in science. And it turns out that they can be used to cure infant disease that's going to save thousands of little tiny babies, right? Which is, yeah, we're all in favor of that. But then, they get my tissue, but they don't realize that during the operation when they take my gallbladder out, they die. Now there's these tissues, this cells that could save thousands of lives, but I never gave consent for those to be used, and now I'm dead, and so I can't give consent. What happens? So let's go back and forth. Let's hear some of your voices and go back and forth. So Casey, I don't think you've got a chance to speak yet.
I mean, normally after an operation, those are kind of discarded. They're not like used for science. And so I think if they decide to use it to build research, they need to address the family of that case if he passed away, because, I mean, he expected them just to kind of throw it away in a way, not because it was cancerous. So I don't know if they really should be able to build off of that without at least compensating him a little bit by his name, giving a little bit of treatment to his family too.
Would have to go to the family. What do you think about that no rights team?
It was your cells. Why should the family get the decision? If you're not there to make the decision, then they're just
And who
whoever
makes the
collected
decision?
them.
The
Like,
medical,
that's-
medical field community?
Yeah, it's up to them,
But-
really.
But that's still essentially stealing.
Or like
Not
what if there is no
really.
family, like at all, like.
Yeah.
What if I'm gonna die alone? This is terrible. This is a terrible scenario. I'm gonna die alone of gallbladder cancer.
So who do you ask if there's no
Yeah.
family then?
So what happens then? You have this chance to save thousands of lives, yet it's impossible, let's say, to get.
I feel like they're still just gonna do it, cause it's gonna save a bunch of lives.
Is that justified? There's no right or wrong answer. Just jump in.
At
Yeah.
this point, they don't even know that it can save all those babies, so like, you're making like an assumption, but you don't know yet, so you can't take someone else's tissue without permission, just because you're going off an assumption that something can happen.
Then how do you find out?
You won't, because it's not yours.
So you're not gonna take the risk.
So you can't from anyone else? You just wouldn't do it at all, you,
Yeah, I feel
would
like
you
it's-
hold off, or?
It's not yours.
It would
I
be,
think we've got.
there's a chance to save, if there's a chance to save thousands of lives, or over, I don't know, I feel like it would be justified.
In that case, that is.
Isn't it that when you die, at least announce this and you don't have anything like written down, all your organs, all your tissues, everything immediately goes to science because it's your like legacy to the greater good. You help your future people, and so that could be, you know, you could say that that's the reason why you would always give away your tissues or your organs when you died, when you didn't give it away, like when you did specifically say you're gonna be a donor, or you're gonna give away your tissues, but it is your job to help the world and other people to get better, even when you die. Like even if you didn't say that, so you could still be that like extra factor to help others. Isn't that a good thing too?
I feel like it's a hard assumption to make that these tissues that come out of a person with gallbladder cancer will like save a lot of babies. And like, yes, that's an amazing goal to have, and that would be great if it could. But if you're taking it out of a person and they die on that table, those doctors who took that out are looking at that gallbladder and thinking, that is gonna help save thousands of lives. You know, and like really at that point, like you were saying, like it's really just under the assumption that it should be discarded. Really, at the naked eye, what are they looking at the gallbladder that makes it seem like it's gonna save thousands of lives? And so really after the surgery, that's when it's supposed to be thrown away. So how is that extra looking into it even happening on the surgery like table? So really that's kind of a defilement of rights at that point.
Dr. Dangloff, I have a question before we proceed.
Sure.
Was this patient a donor of tissue and organs before passing?
They never specified.
They never specified.
Yeah.
So they never
Then
asked.
according to HIPAA, it would be a violation to use their cells,
It would be
even
because
if they
it's-
tried to ask permission from the family.
On July 21st, 1980, the California Court of Appeals made a decision declaring human tissue property of this person from whom it is removed.
Okay.
So if it's not
Ashley, you had
Wait,
For, I mean, just think about it, like, this might sound cold, but like, if this person is dying, what's it gonna hurt? Use their cell, at the end of the day, I mean, like, they're dead. I mean, like, use their cell, like, it's not gonna hurt it's not gonna hurt them, it's not gonna affect them in any way. Like, it's like, you might as well use it for good. Like, at least try to use it for good.
Yeah, but that's a pretty slippery slope. Like, if you're just starting to take things from people's bodies, like, who's to say that someone isn't gonna do that to
So
someone
I mean, I
who's
feel like you can
living?
I feel like
You
you
have
can
to
tell
draw
it's used for like science and like, I'm not like, some of the hardest organs like selling the black market, those are different.
Yeah.
Wake up in the bathtub life.
Bryce, you great. This is your second one. This is great. So I told you we could do it.
The slippery slope and everything, but like being a doctor, you have to take an oath to like do no harm. So I feel like that's kind of a mistake, but risk it and
With the possibility of helping a lot of people.
You're
With the
definitely
possibility of
right.
helping a lot of people.
You're helping them.
All right, yeah.
I just think like the thing with research is we never know what the result is in advance. That's why we do the research. And so if we're saying like, I just think the result of what you're saying would be research like drastically declines. The volume of research goes way down. And if you guys are okay with that, fine. But
I'm good with
it's like research alone is the reason we have superior health and medical care today than we did in the year 1900 and the year 1800. And if you guys want to slow that pace, fine, but like know that that's what you're doing.
It is
I
also
feel like you should
being-
get money.
It is also been used to exploit a lot of people, like you were, like Cameron was saying earlier. Like during the Holocaust, yeah, there was a lot of experimental research advancements, but that was also done through people who were in prison and really did not have any choice. And really, that's how it's been a lot of times, like especially with like child research. It's been done many years ago, not with their consent, not with parents' consent. It just kind of happened. And so, like, yeah, it's good to have those advances, I guess, but it's also kind of teeter-tottering between like, is it worth it for the harm that it's forged on that person?
I think this back and forth right here, I'm just gonna pause for a second, is really kind of getting to the heart of it. And so I think this is, looking at the time, I think this is actually a good place to end up. Now we're finally like getting, people are getting excited, I love it. Before we do though, I wanna make sure that anyone who hasn't had a chance to speak up, if they have anything you wanna jump in yet. But you've spoken a couple
I
times.
know, I just want to say that the U.S. 8th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the Washington University in the case of medical ownership, in which unanimous decision, they ruled that tissue and blood samples donated to the university belong to the institution.
So they belong to the institution, not the person. Interesting. Okay, so we have some legal precedent, but the heart of the moral questions here. So I see lots of hands still up, and I apologize. I do want to keep us moving. I have one little activity I want to do and make sure we can end class on time. So everyone, take a breath, give yourself a round of applause. That was a really interesting debate. I appreciate all the contributions and you know the takeaway message is that it's complicated, right? And there's lots of different potential scenarios. So go ahead and get back to your regular seat and I'll set us up for our next activity.
I feel like it's just pressure so packed in here. It's like, I cannot support
All right, I just want to say thanks to everyone for being flexible with the seating. I know this arrangement, this room isn't really conducive to that kind of thing, so thanks for working with that. So in your class program for Wednesday, you've got a few reflection questions about this debate that I think will take you between 20 and 30 minutes to look at. It's in Blackboard. It's a little more in-depth than like a typical survey. And so what I'd like to do now is, while we've just been in the heat of this debate, while you're thinking about this, we're going to take 5 minutes just on your own. I want you to think about and take some notes on how you'll respond to these questions. So what do you think is the most convincing argument in favor of patient-donor rights to tissue? So what was Team B's best argument that a person should retain rights to what happens to their tissue? Contrarily, is that the word? Yeah, on the opposite, yeah, au contraire. What do you think is most convincing argument against right? So what was team A's most convincing argument? What did you learn from this activity that was surprising? So from the reading or the debate, what kind of like pushed your thinking a little bit? And finally, if you had to describe someone, like let's say you're talking to your aunt about this class, and you have to describe to them your opinion on this subject in one sentence, what's that sentence going to be? So just go ahead while all these thoughts are fresh in your mind. Take some notes on these. These same questions are your reflection questions for Wednesday, and there's a survey set up in Blackboard and all those details in your class program. But just while it's fresh, get down some ideas. That's a perfect time. All right, just a few quick announcements to wrap up. Quiz number 2 is on Friday, and overwhelmingly, the class in the survey said that they liked the format of the last quiz, so we're going to stick with that. So same format, it's going to be open after class this Friday and due the following Monday. It's going to cover material from the 21st of January to the 31st of January. Now the 31st is today, so I actually should have changed that. It won't actually cover, it won't have anything on the tissue ownership. The reflection that you do for this today is that's going to be it. So that's everything on the integumentary system and then everything on the skeletal system up through the postcranial axial skeleton, so what we covered on Friday. It will include multiple choice and short answer questions, just like last time. Open book, open note, but you got to work on your own. Again, 20 minutes to take it. It sounds like it actually took a little bit longer, which is usually the case. Usually open book stuff takes longer because you're looking stuff up. But it was within a range that I felt like was acceptable. But I'll leave the window open for 3 hours in Blackboard, so you won't be rushed. 30 class points, and it's going to be due by Monday. And just a reminder that you should stick with referencing materials in class. Don't just go Googling and finding information, because you'll go down a misleading rabbit hole. Any questions about the quiz, content or format? All right, a couple other reminders is that you, in your program, you see a reflection for Wednesday. Note that it's worth 8 class points. I'm looking for a little more thoughtful, in-depth answers compared to a normal survey, and so the points are increasingly larger. And you'll see in your class program where it is in Blackboard. So take some time. Note that I'm looking for some thoughtful reflection. So I'd like it to be in like complete sentences, but I'm not looking for like super well-crafted, polished essay format, right? It's just your reflections. So I'm looking for thoughtfulness and ideas in a way that I can understand it. You don't have to like do multiple drafts of it or anything like that. I'm not looking for that kind of level of completion. Otherwise, we will have lab tomorrow. We're going to have the same lab we were supposed to have last week on histology. And as a reminder, it's going to include a quiz from lab 1 the first week. And so that will cover body cavities, directional terms, planes, and cat skin. So let me know if you have questions about that. We'll have the quiz will be right at the start of lab. It'll be kind of an in-person interactive kind of quiz. And you'll see that format, and there'll be a format we'll follow all throughout the semester. And finally, don't forget I have open hours today from noon to 2 in the lab room. If you have any questions, feel free to stop by. Otherwise, thanks everyone. I will see you in lab tomorrow, and I'll stick around if anyone has any questions.